Hello folks, welcome back to Refit and Sail. My name is George, this is the Solent Boat Butler. I refit and repair boats for a living. A lot of those boats are Contessa 32s, but I do work on other boats as well, including my own. All these boats get featured on this channel. This is an SJ320 which I bought with my own money about 6, 7, 8 months ago now, and she has been undergoing a bit of a refit because she was very, very tired. She was the cheapest SJ320 that I could find in all of Europe, and she's all mine, and I can't wait to get her in the water, which is going to happen in the next few days. But I have a mountain of little jobs that I need to sort out over this weekend. It's currently Saturday morning, and I just need to get them all knocked out so that I can go splash on Monday or Tuesday of next week, and you are along for the ride. So what am I going to be doing today? I have a bunch of engine things I want to do. So the exhaust elbow on this boat is really crusty, rusty. I think it's kind of okay, but maybe on the way out. So I have a brand new exhaust elbow to go on. And whilst I'm at it, I'm going to replace the exhaust hose that goes straight out of the boat because it is looking pretty disgusting. I will show you it in a minute. It is on its last legs, and I do not want that going pop when I am out sailing. It is a safety thing, but it's also about building reliability and resilience into the boat, because it's no good having the smoothest bottom in the world and the best sails in the world, which I don't have at the moment, but it's no good having those things if you can't get out to the start line or can't get home safely at the end of the day. So that needs to be sorted. I'm going to do all the engine servicing once it's in the water, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff like replacing the lifeline ties for these things because they are not very safe. I want to do some mods to the engine gear lever to improve that because it sticks up. It's just going to get in the way, and you'll just have to follow along and see. I can't remember them all. Stay tuned for more boat works on the SJ320. Well folks, you're in the port aft cabin now, and I'm hoping that this is going to be a quick win just to get it knocked off the list. Here's the exhaust elbow. Connected to this is normally a rubber hose. This is a brand new piece of exhaust hose that I've already pre-cut to go from here to the waterlock. But to remove this, it should be fairly straightforward. 4 bolts and a gasket. I also need to remove this rubber fitting here, which goes onto the heat exchanger, and I'm hoping I can just undo that, pop it off, undo that, pop it off, put the new one in. But you know, this is a boat job, so it will probably be an absolute swine, but I live in hope that one of these days a quick job will actually once be a quick job. Oh, there we go. So that was as fun as you can probably imagine, but I'm pleased I did it. It was fun because all the bolts are slightly rusty, mostly very inaccessible, but just for fun, the most inaccessible one, I couldn't get the 12mm socket on, which was the same size for all the others, and I just thought, I'll try 13. It's a 13 nut. So after lots of faffing, the 13 nut came off quite easily, and I'm very pleased I have taken this off because that is the water injection point, and you can see how small it is because this is all full of rust. Up there is pretty disgusting as well. I doubt you can see it, but I'm very happy to be able to pop this in the bin. I'm going to be throwing on the new one, which is in this bag. It's a genuine Volvo Penta part. These are quite expensive. It was a little bit painful to spend this amount of money on something that doesn't make the boat go any faster, but as I said in the introduction, this is all about having reliability and resilience in the boat system so you can actually get out to the racecourse, and here is that brand new one. Given how expensive it was, it's a bit disappointing that it hasn't even been painted. I don't know whether it has an anti-rust coating on it. Maybe it is. It's black. It's got something on it. But I think once this is on, I might come in with a little pot of paint and just give it a quick coat just to stop it from getting all rusty. So I'm going to clean the old gasket off in there and then put this straight on, put some grease on the bolts so that in the unlikely event I need to take it off, I actually can, and then we can call this job done and ticked off the list. Just for the sake of comparison, there is the old and there is the new. You can see the size that the hole should be in there. So that's the seawater injection, and many litres or gallons of seawater have gone through there and it has rusted up. On my cruising boats I have a 2040, so it's the same series, same type of engine as this, exactly the same elbow, and this completely clogged to the point where the water was being pressurized and couldn't escape down the exhaust, so it was pressurizing the freshwater side, the coolant side of the system, so I was getting salt water running around the engine, which is not good. So I'm very happy to be replacing this before I have that same problem reoccur. This is a really common replacement service item on any diesel engine. Well, I am very pleased that that went back together really easily, and I'm also very pleased to have it done. Next up, this is a new piece of hose, as I said, which goes from here down to the waterlock, but the hose that runs on from the waterlock out to the boat is looking very, very tired, and I will show you a picture of that now. I'm going to have to climb into the cockpit locker to undo it, but essentially, these hoses do not last forever. They get very hard, and if there have been problems with the engine cooling system, it could be that it's slightly damaged from excess heat or just old age. In the case of this boat, I think it is just old age, because if we look at this in the stern locker in a minute, you'll see the wire that runs through this. You can't see it because I've chopped it off. There is a wire that is a spiral through these hoses, so you can bend them and they won't kink closed, but that wire eventually rusts out and rusts through the rubber coating, and that's what's happened. So let me show you that now. Here's the hose in the bottom of the locker. I am imagining that this is the original hose from when the boat was built. You can see where it's starting to break up, so the wire that runs through is rusting out and it's breaking the rubber that is over it, and that is just not very far away in my view from going completely. So I've got to undo it right back there where it looks particularly nasty and difficult to get to, but some areas of this hose is a bit down there where you can just see it is just about to fail, I think. So this is going to be well worth replacing. Well, I feel absolutely justified in replacing this exhaust hose, because that's the part that fell off. I say fell, ripped off when I was removing this off the skin fitting at the back of the boat. Here's the other end. It went on there somewhere, and up inside the hose it is completely mullered. It is just well, there isn't any of the spiral left. I can just sort of squash this with my fingers because it's all just rusted away. So I would say this was just in time replacement. It's absolute toast, so it can go down there. I'm going to be replacing it with brand new stuff. It's exactly the same from Vitus, and it should just be a case of pulling it through, doing it up, connect it all up, and away I go. What I have done whilst I was at it is I've taken the waterlock and given that a bit of a rinse out, because there's actually bits of rust in the bottom of the waterlock. I could hear it moving around, so I took that under the boat and washed it all out, poured it all out. I suspect that is rust that has come from the exhaust elbow that I replaced earlier, and maybe some of that is also the wire that is inside this hose. Now, when I'm refitting it, you can just cut this stuff with a very sharp Stanley knife, but inside, obviously, that wire needs cutting. That is a very tough piece of wire to cut. Normal cable cutters will not do it, so cable cutters that you use for cutting electrical wire, don't use those, you'll just damage them. You need a hardened steel blade wire cutter. The other option is to use an oscillating saw with a wire cutting blade in it. Bosch do one called Metal Max, which cuts through ferrous and non-ferrous metals, and I use those quite a lot for cutting this stuff if you want a nice neat cut. But 9 times out of 10 it's quicker to use a knife, pull it apart, the wire kind of expands and pulls out the plastic a little bit, and then chop it off, job done. Well, that's the complete exhaust system now on this boat replaced, apart from the waterlock, which I reuse. I will check it for leaks when I can run the engine, and I can't run the engine until the boat is back in the water. So for now, that is all done. Now, I'm probably wearing different clothes to the rest of this video because I am recording this segment a few days before I record the rest of the video. It is currently Wednesday and I'm going to record the rest on the weekend. But one of the things I want to do, because it needs drying time, is to put some protection on my prop to stop the fouling from sticking or growing. And I have the benefit of being given some crystal prop propeller coating, which uses nanotech technology. This was supplied by T Norris Limited, T Norris Marine. Simon Norris is a friend of mine, so he said, give this stuff a try, George, and let me know what you think. That's one of the benefits of having a boat within the business, is I can test new products and give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down in terms of using them on my clients' boats. But he said that he has had lots of very, very good reports from clients of his that have used it. So it is called Crystal Propellers, and it is a 2-component product which you have to mix up in a little pot and paint on your prop, but there is a certain amount of prep work that needs to be done on the prop. So yesterday I went over my prop, having put it back onto the boat, with a wire cut brush on my angle grinder just to get rid of all the old coatings that were on it. And then I read the instructions and it said give it a sand with 80 grit, and that is probably because they want to have a slightly rough textured surface for this stuff to stick to. I'll be perfectly honest with you, in previous years I have used multiple different types of propeller anti-fouling, and some stick, some don't. For the last few years I've been using a product called Velox, which I found to be pretty good. If you do all the proper preparation, it does stick reasonably well, but even that tends to come off after a season, or at least it partially detaches. So I'm interested to try this stuff this year on my own prop. I'm going to give the prop one more wipe down with acetone just to make sure it is absolutely 100% clean, which is again what the instructions say, having just read them. And then it's 50-50, these two in a pot, well mix, and then you've got 2 hours to put the stuff on your prop. But the reason I'm doing it today is it does say you need to give it at least 72 hours of drying time before you put the boat in the water. So I'm guessing the longer the better, particularly at lower temperatures like we've got at the moment. It is in the middle of February in the UK. So I'm going to go give the prop one more wipe. I've done it a couple of times, but I'm just trying to give this as good a chance as I possibly can to stick, and then we'll mix it up, brush it on, and then I'll be able to report back maybe at the end of the season or next time I get the boat lifted on how well it does. Right, I am back. Prop is cleaned. Basically I just kept wiping it with acetone until the rag, which was white, was basically going over it but still looked clean. So it is spotless according to my measuring jug. That is 25 mils. Same again of this. It would be a faux pas to put the same one in twice, wouldn't it? Oh, this one's much more liquid. Right. There we go. That is the other 25. Give it a good mix. Don't smell it. It smells very sweet actually, but sweet and chemically. Probably shouldn't have done that. Don't do that. Health and safety warning. Do not do what I do. I'm a professionally trained idiot. Although there were no dire warnings on wearing masks and PPE and stuff like that, and wearing gloves. Well, that's the prop done. We'll just have to see how it works in practice, but it kind of looks shiny. We'll see how we go. Now I'm going to do another engine job, I'm afraid, but this time it's actually a more interesting engine job, because this engine job makes the boat sail better, and I will explain why. I currently have a very normal Teleflex style engine control lever in the cockpit, and it sticks up and it is going to catch every single rope that goes near it. I know that because in my previous boats, every time I want to jibe the spinnaker or do something like that, despite whatever I do with the ropes love getting caught around gear levers, and there is a fix for that on some boats that I have worked on. I have fitted this thing here. So this is a spin lock removable engine control lever panel, and it fits onto a standard Teleflex style control body or control lever. All you do is mount one of these things here, and it has what looks like a standard winch handle socket on it, so you can, if you want, use a winch handle if you get stuck. But the idea is that you use one of these. This is a removable spin lock winch handle, and it just clips in exactly like a normal winch handle. So it's got a star drive on the end there with a square bit that kind of turns when I turn the lever. Because the engine control lever on this boat is original, and I'm not convinced it is actually working particularly well. I've had a bit of a wiggle with it and I'm not convinced it's actually selecting the gears properly, in that it seems to be a little bit loose at the back there. So I have bought a new gear lever. So this is the handle that comes with it, which will go straight into my spares box round in the workshop. But in this box I have a piece that goes behind it, which is this mechanism here. So this should be a direct replacement for the mechanism that is on the boat. And what's nice about having a new mechanism is everything's nice and positive and will click in and out of gear, and I'll be able to select the revs I want. And you can adjust the friction on these, I believe, as well. So if you want more or less friction, you can have it exactly how you want it. So I'm going to take down the headlining in the starboard back cabin back there and see how far I get. This is a job that is highly likely to need 2 people. So I'm going to see how far I get, and I may see if I can find a random in the boatyard to come and give me a hand, because I haven't got any helpers today because it is a Saturday. But it's a good Saturday because I'm getting to play with my own boat. Well, headlining down, and that is the back end of the gear lever. It actually looks in fairly decent condition. It's not overly worn, but it was definitely slipping when I was moving the gear lever in and out of gear. So I think the splines have gone inside the handle that were there. It's time to chuck that in the bin and replace it with a new one. Now, unfortunately for me, this one was mounted horizontally, and they could have drilled it for the vertical orientation but just used the horizontal holes on this, but they didn't when they built the boat, because you've kind of got 2 options, but the hole spacing is the same. Unfortunately, the hole spacing in relation to the big hole that needs to be in the middle is not, and they've drilled it that way round and I want it that way round. I could mount it like that, but it's going to be very confusing whenever anyone comes on my boat and looks at the gear lever and you know, neutral is pointing that way. Now I can put the handle wherever I want it, but people will naturally look at the dots and look at the arrows and what have you, and so I want to have it mounted that way round, which means this hole here doesn't marry up with that hole there. So I can fix that quite simply by filling the old mounting holes, doing a little gel repair, and then drilling new holes so I can fit it that way around. So this is probably not going to get fitted now today, so that's slightly annoying. But that's old boats for you. Simple jobs are never quite simple. Well, folks, it is now Sunday morning, and I've got to be honest, I can't 100% remember where I got to in terms of filming. I kind of stopped filming when I had to fill these holes. So I put a bit of glass fibre filler in the back end, and then I put a bit of gel coat over the top. The gel coat isn't a brilliant colour match, but half of it's going to get covered. In fact, most of it is going to get covered, so I'm not too worried about that. I've got a whole load of gel repairs that need doing at some point, but they are not going to stop me from sailing the boat, because I very much have the mantra that it is better to go sailing in a boat that is less than perfect because you're out sailing. That's far more important. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do like a nice tidy boat, I like everything done, but I won't let a few scratches in the gel coat stop me from going sailing. Because I don't like stopping a job halfway through, if at all possible, I had a go at dry fitting it, and it turns out I can fit this on my own. Basically, from the other side, I have to stick my finger through the hole when the boss isn't there, and I can put my finger on the end of the screw and put up the mounting blocks that are on the inside, which I'll show you in a minute. But it's basically all dry fitting, it all works. I did have to take these two top screws out and cut them down slightly, because obviously they provide bolts, but they don't necessarily know how thick your deck is going to be, and this is relatively thin. So I had to take them out, cut them down, put them back in, and also had to grind off a couple of little knobbly bits on the back of the mechanism on the back plate of this, the teleflex mechanism, not the spin lock bit, just because, you know, slight modifications, but that was super easy. And now we can put this removable handle in, and we've got a lovely positive click action because it's a nice new mechanism behind there. And if we want to increase the revs without the engine being in gear, we can do it exactly as we would with a normal teleflex, where you push the little red button in. But in this case, we push the whole lever in, and then we've got the ability to increase the RPMs on the engine without the engine being in gear. Of course, bring it up to the top, it will click out, and then we're back into being in gear. So well pleased with that. Let me show you inside, and then it's all going to come apart, get covered in sealant, put back together again, job done. Here we are on the inside, so you can see that is all dry mounted. I haven't got every single fixing in, but I've got enough just to make sure it all fits. These are the little spacers that I was talking about that need to be there, because everything is pushed kind of slightly inboard of where it's being mounted. And yeah, it all just goes together really super easily. So I'm going to pull that apart again, put some sealant on everything, and put it back in again, and we'll call it done. Ooh. There we go. Now, one thing you do have to do to get to the fixings is you have to rotate the mechanism here, and you just need to be careful you don't trap your fingers anywhere, because this does love to trap fingers if you aren't quite sure how it's going to move. The other thing I've got to do before this is finally mounted is there's 3 little grub screws that hold the spin lock boss onto the teleflex controller. They need Loctite on them. I just put it together, as I said, dry fit, so I'm now going to slip that off, Loctite, bang it back on, sealant on there, can all go together. In, just check it works out of gear, pull it out, clunk, 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 clunk. Lovely, really pleased with that. That is something I've wanted to do since I got this boat. Well folks, the wind is picking up and it's getting cold and the day is moving on, but there is one little job I want to do next, which I've been meaning to do ever since I bought this boat, and that is to replace these horrible old lashings. Now, this isn't just an aesthetic thing, this is a safety thing. People forget to replace their lashings if they have them, and first of all, it is a requirement of the racing rules to replace any rope lashings once a year. If they are out in the sun, they get UV degraded, out in the weather they just rot, and unfortunately the first time people find that their lashings are no longer safe to use is when someone goes backwards over the side, ideally not in the middle of a race or in the middle of the English Channel, or maybe in unpleasant conditions when recovering people from the water is difficult. So for the sake of a very small amount of money and a little bit of time, it is worth replacing these annually. If you don't do it annually, certainly biannually. If you haven't done it for many years, go and get a knife, cut them off and replace them right now before you're back in the water, because your family or your friends will thank you for not going for an unplanned swim. So this is just 3mm line. I've just picked up a spool of it from the chandlery, and just going to bowl in that onto there, and then just as the old one was, run it backwards and forwards, and then finish it off with a bunch of hitches, and that not only looks a lot better but keeps me and anyone sailing with me safe. That seems adequately tensioned. Done. Easy peasy. Lifelines are done, and I've changed because it's actually surprisingly cold. It's quite a brisk wind blowing from the east behind me, so I need to start looking at these winches. They have not been serviced in many years, I suspect, and they all turn, they all make the right noises, but I suspect the grease in them is very hard, very old, or possibly non-existent. So we're going to strip as many down as the weather allows. For this you will need lots of tissue. I always use a washing up bowl for cleaning, and for cleaning you will need a solvent. I'm not telling you what I'm going to use, but I'll give you a clue. My van runs on it. A toothbrush is really good for cleaning stubborn grease with the solvent out of all the bearings and everything like that, and so you basically disassemble everything, get everything as clean as you can, re-grease as required, grease on all the surfaces that are bearing on each other. The only place you don't use grease is on the pull springs, on the pulls, which are the clicky bits, and for that you use a light oil. I've got some 3-in-1 oil. You can buy proper Luma or Harken oil. This does the same job. Likewise for grease, you can buy proper Luma grease, but you can also use much cheaper tubs of grease, as long as it is calcium sulfonate grease, which is the component in this which makes it a load bearing grease. It's also used for trailer bearings, folding props and other things like that. So I'm all for using manufacturers' products when it's required, but when it's not required and you can buy a cheaper alternative, then this is Ramonol Universal Multipurpose Marine Grease. But the important thing is there are two types of grease you can buy for boats, and it has to be the one with calcium sulfonate. Sulfonate, is that right? Let's try and find it on the thing here. Yes. High performance, water resistant, calcium sulfonate grease for extreme conditions. So that is what we will be using. I'm hoping there isn't too much wind noise. I've got my fluffy on my mic. But anyway, these are Luma winches. They are Luma Ocean winches. They've been around for a very long time, and you can't quite undo the top. You just bump the top and then it unscrews, and that's literally the only tool you need pretty much to get these things apart. The fact that this does not spin off easily is telling me that they have not been apart for some time. That normally spins off super easily, and the most important thing is to not lose any bits. So strip a ring off, drum off. The drum won't come off until I take these little two doodads out, which I may... Oh, they should come out easily, but they don't. So take that off, then the drum will come off. Not as bad as I feared, but still needs doing. Then we can take the bearings off. One bearing, a spacer, another bearing. Drop them in the washing up bowl. Got a bin bag just down here because you will be throwing away lots of tissue. There is another plastic ring there. You can go in the tub, and then you've got two pins that I'll lift up with a little screwdriver. I'll get to them in a minute, and then you can pull the cogs out. These are where the pulls are on both sides, I think, and I'll get to them in a minute, because I like cleaning a bit, putting it aside, and then taking the next bit apart. So I'm going to set up a time lapse, but it is simply a case of pulling these things apart. But the important thing you must remember when you put them back together is the poles must go the right way around. So if you put it in, just visually check that the poles fully engage squarely with where they locate on the outer cog down here. As long as that is the case, then pop it all back together. If you're unsure, if you're worried you're going to forget how it all goes back together, take photographs as you go. Take the drum off, take a picture, take a bit more apart, take a picture, and then when you put it all back together again, you won't be second guessing yourself whether you're doing it the right way or not. So you can just look on your phone and check it is all good. That, or just do one kind of piece at a time. But I'm not going to record the whole thing because there is only so much internet to go around. I think I did do a video about servicing my Lumar Evo winches on my westerly ages ago when I was in the Azores. That wind is really blowing now. So you can go and have a look at that if you have some Evo winches. They're all basically similar. One big difference are the Harken winches, because they have dry bearings. These have greased bearings, so you need to make sure you only grease the bits that need grease. If they are self-lubricating plastic or acetal bearings, they should be just left dry, washed out with a bit of water, and that's about it. Right, I'm going to crack on with some cleaning, and I'm going to cue some music. Well, that's interesting. I've just discovered that you can't get this cog out because it hits against the side of the boat. So I'm not entirely sure what to do here now. The only way to get that out is probably to remove the winch from the deck. So that wasn't very well planned by whoever fitted it, but I'm just going to have to clean it up as best I can in place, because I'm not taking the winch off today. That's very annoying. Very annoying indeed. Fortunately, it does appear to be working correctly, so I'm just going to have to clean it up as best I can. Well, I've just reassembled this fella here, so I've put the pulls. These are the pulls with the little pull springs in there. It's critical that these go in the right way around. It's pretty obvious which way they go on these winches, but some winches, particularly older Lumar, sometimes it's not entirely obvious which way round they go, because they're of a different design. But this is the one place where you don't put grease, you put oil in here. So I'm going to get my little oil pot, and you don't put grease in, because if the grease goes hard, then it stops the pulls from working. So I'll just get a little bit in there, and that is all they need. Lid on that so I don't spill it. And I'll just give these a little flick like this normally, just to make sure that it is well in there. And then you put grease on the surfaces which are going to be wearing on each other. So I put a little bit of grease right in the bottom of there, around that hole, and I might just put the lightest bit just on the inside of here, because again, that's where the pulls are going to be running. That's almost a bit too much, but I'm struggling with tissue flying everywhere because it's actually blimmin' windy, which is very annoying. But that is now together and clicking nicely if I hold it next to my microphone. And if you turn it upside down, it all falls apart. Fortunately, I didn't lose the pulls. So before that goes back in, put a bit of grease on the top and the bottom. It really just needs a little smear on there, top and bottom. Now, if memory serves, it goes that way around. So I'm going to pop that in there, pop the pin back in, and there we go. stripper ring also needs to locate on this little plastic fella here. I don't know if you can see that. So that just goes in there. I'm going to have my stripper ring here, and then we can spin the top back on, and I always put a teeny tiny bit of grease on here. There's already some on the threads. It's a little O-ring here that compresses as you do it up. Let's put a tiny bit on the threads. Screw that on, and she is done. Well, I've just had a bit of a tidy up because whilst I was cleaning this, I was obviously flicking some of the solvent around, and the wind was just carrying it up the boat, and it was just making a complete mess. So I'm not going to do any more winch servicing today. But what I wanted to tell you was that as well as being able to buy all the replacement parts for this from Lumar, from the chandlery, sometimes you do also need to replace these plastics. So these plastic bits at the top which grip the rope as part of the self-tailing mechanism, they do expire after a period of time, or they can get damaged. These look okay, but I'll see how they are in actual use. They are plastic, they do wear, they don't last forever, and they're pretty easy to swap out if you need to. Right, I'm going to call that done for now. It works as well as I would like it. It would be nice if it ran a bit freer, but it might be a bit worn inside. But at least I know it's clean. I haven't overloaded it with grease, and I can't really do any more than that. Now, because it's forecast to pour with rain in the next half an hour, and it's quite windy out there, I'm not going to get any more winches done today, but there are some jobs that I'm going to try and just see if I can do quickly. You will remember, possibly, if you saw an earlier video, that with this boat I got 2 big bags of ropes because all the ropes have been pulled off the mast by the previous owner, or previous owner's son, I believe, and thankfully they were all labelled. Now, I am going to have to replace quite a few of these lines, unfortunately, but for the sake of getting in the water and getting the boat sailed round to where I'm going to be keeping her in a few days' time, I need to get some lines on. So I have put some on already. I've got some halyards on, but I don't have any reefing lines, and this is reef 1. I have a very grotty looking main sheet. This boat, I've just had a look, is set up for a continuous line main sheet system, so it has a pair of jammers, and so you have one single line, and you can either pull both at the same time to pull it in at, say, 3-to-1, or you can pull one and it's 6-to-1. That is the way this works, but this line has been cut, so it's no longer a continuous line. It's been pulled off. So I'm going to measure this, but then I'm going to put this on, but it won't be a continuous line, but because I've measured it, I can go and order myself some new rope along with some new halyards that I'm going to get. I've also got some things like the main sheet traveller lines and numerous other lines which I need to find a home for. So I'm just going to see what fits where. I need a kicker, I need to work out which lines are my spinnaker lines and whether they need replacing. So I'm just going to do a little bit of organisation here. Not very interesting probably for you to watch, but this is all part of putting a boat back together and getting it back into service. Well, you probably saw me struggling there a bit to work out how this is supposed to be reeved, how it's supposed to be arranged through all these blocks. I've not had a system exactly like this before, and in the end I took it all out and started from the middle because it's a twin system. It's got a pair of lines that come out, so as I said, you can have double purchase or single purchase effectively, 3-to-1 or 6-to-1. In fact, it's more than that. It's more like 4-to-1 and 8-to-1, I think, with these blocks. This definitely needs replacing. This rope has kind of had it. It's not very nice on your hands. It's also a bit thick, so it doesn't run through the blocks very easily. I don't like it when people oversize ropes, so that's probably 12, and I'm going to take it down to 10 mil. And I might even rethink how all these blocks run. I'm going to get my friendly rigger Dave to come and have a look and give me some advice on what he thinks will work. But for now, this is going to have to do. So I'm going to stick some lines on for the Traveller next, and I think that's a single continuous line. and it is spitting with rain, so it's going to be time to hide indoors very, very soon. Well folks, it's now Monday morning. I should be doing proper paid work, but there's nothing better than playing with your own boat on a weekday. So I'm going to do a job which I didn't really want to do. The fuel tank in this boat looks pretty clean. It's got an inspection hatch. It's actually under the bunk I'm sitting on at the moment. Looks fairly clean from what I can see through a clear inspection hatch. However, the fuel that is in it is very, very, very old, and fuel unfortunately these days has so much bioethanol content in it, it does tend to go off far more rapidly than it did years ago. Initially I thought I'd get away with chucking some fresh diesel in with what's here and mixing it all up and just running kind of a mix of old and new, but I can't quite bring myself to leave that in there and leave the old fuel in there. At the end of the day, it is a safety thing. So I have borrowed off my friend a fuel transfer pump, which includes filters in it. So it's like a fuel polisher at the same time. And I'm going to be sucking all the old fuel out of the tank, sucking all the old fuel out of all the lines, replacing all the filters. And then when I refill it, I can suck through new fuel to the engine, and I know that if I have any problems with the engine, it isn't going to be with the fuel. So I'm just trying to tick off potential issues once I get afloat and get this boat sailing. Under here is the fuel tank. I've got two small opening things, but I can see through these little windows there are inspection hatches in the tank, and that's going to be the easiest way to get in. So I'm going to start by unscrewing the top of this. And there is the fuel tank. So I've got a visual sight glass here, which I can see into the tank, and to be honest with you, it looks pretty clean in there. And then I've got this one, which is going into the other side. I'm guessing there's a baffle in the middle here. Just looking at the way it's been constructed, I can see there's a bit of a weld in there, so I suspect it's in kind of two sections. But I'm going to open up that side because I can see that's got like a nitrile gasket on it, so I should be able to bolt that back down quite easily, whereas this side looks like it has some sort of red goo sealant on it, and I'd rather leave that alone and reuse the one with a gasket. In fact, I've now got goo on my fingers. I'm assuming it wasn't leaking. Let's hope that is the case. And there is the fuel. Well, here is the fuel transfer and polishing rig I'm going to be using for sucking the fuel out. So it's simply a pump which sucks via a pair of filters. So if one filter gets blocked, the other one can kind of take up the slack, but in theory it's pulling from both of them. I'm just going to stick this hose down into the fuel tank, and I'm going to stick the other hose into a big empty acetone drum that I've got here, and hopefully there is no more than this amount of fuel in the tank. There shouldn't be. According to the sight gauge, there is about 35 litres in the tank, which I think, from memory, this is about 40 litres. But we shall see. Oh, this doesn't belong to me. I borrowed it from a friend, marine engineer friend, who and I have used it many, many times for sucking fuel out of tanks that need cleaning. Off it goes. I can see the fuel bubbling down here through the filters. You may or may not be able to see that, but fuel is coming out. There we go. Lovely jubbly. Well, that's all the fuel out, and it has to be said that's a very quick way of doing it. And as I said, the inside of the tank, it looks pretty clean. There is a baffle that runs along there, so I can't get my arm in and clean that bit, but if that bit is as clean as this bit, and by the looks of it, it is, I really don't have too much to worry about in the tank. Right, let's give this a quick wipe, and I'm just going to run a tissue around the inside. And look, no black. I mean, that is not perfectly clean, but it's minimal slime in there. I'd be happy just to close this up, but I'm going to give it a wipe anyway, because I might as well whilst I'm here. But there is no debris whatsoever at the bottom, which is quite unusual. I suspect this tank has been cleaned maybe in the last 10 years, and the boat then basically wasn't used. There might be just a tiny bit of slime right in the very bottom. I'm just trying to wipe it out. Smells like diesel, but that's literally all I can get out of the bottom of the tank. So compared against some tanks I've seen, this is almost spotlessly clean. Well, as I often say, plans are made in sand, and I had planned to use the bulb near the fuel tank, near the primary fuel filter and water separator to suck through the fuel, but then I remembered I have my vacuum pump on the boat in preparation for sucking the oil out, and so I have connected up the vacuum pump to the fuel line, which is just here out of shot, which is connected normally to the lift pump on the engine, and that way I can be very lazy and just suck whatever is in the fuel lines straight out, and then I know I'm sucking the fuel rather than pushing the fuel. The problem I was going to have doing it with the bulb is I was going to start pumping air, and that doesn't work very well on one of those fuel bulb. This is a much more thorough way of doing it, and now I can hear it's gurgling from the tank because I have already sucked through all the fuel and it's now sucking air. I quite like the idea of sucking through some fresh diesel from the tank and out into the vacuum pump, but before I do that I'm going to replace the filter, which is just down here. So it's a standard CAV type filter. This fella here, no idea when it was last replaced, so I have a brand new one, and I'm going to chuck that on, and then I'm going to put some fuel in the tank, suck it through that filter, which will effectively bleed that, and then we can move on to the engine. Well, that is the fuel filter changed, and I feel very justified in doing this. Whilst the tank is very clean, the fuel that came out of the fuel filter looked like that. So there's a fair amount of water in there, which is less than ideal. There is a drain on the bottom of the CAV filter, so it might be, for the first little while of using the boat, every now and again I might drain a bit of fuel off just to see if it looks like that, or see if clean fuel is coming out. Might be that I need to change the O-ring on the deck filler. I will check that, or maybe just change it as a matter of course. Or it's entirely possible that, having had the boat sit for such a long time, that is just condensation in the tank that's run down, sat in the bottom of the tank and then got sucked through. That is probably the most likely cause, but either way, we don't want water in our fuel, and I'm very happy now to stick some fresh stuff in there, which I'll then suck through using the vac pump, and then we can get on with just changing the fuel filter on the engine, and hopefully none of that water has got into the injector pump. Well, off camera I've been a bit naughty. I've been working away without showing you what I've been up to, but just to explain, I ended up bleeding everything through as far as the fine filter that is on the engine, and then I wanted to make sure there was no dirty, horrible, watery goo fuel that isn't fuel in the injector pump. So I cracked off the 3 injector nuts, span the engine over. Obviously it can't start with the injectors just squirting fuel out into the air rather than squirting it into the cylinder, and I kept going with that until I got nice pink red diesel coming through, because what was initially coming through looked suspiciously like water. So I then tightened up the injector nuts, span it over, and it reluctantly tried to cough into life, and I stopped at that point because you're not allowed to run diesel engines whilst boats are ashore here, and I didn't want to get told off by the yard manager. So I'm feeling fairly hopeful that this engine will start once I get her in the water. I'll get the yard to tow the boat round to a marina berth when it first goes in, because I don't want my first trip to be on an engine that's completely untested. Whenever I do an engine service on a client's boat, I always run the engine in the marina for at least half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour, just to make sure there's no air bubbles or air in the diesel system, and that everything's going to be all good before it moves anywhere under its own power. I think that's a sensible thing to do. Now, we are going in the water tomorrow, is the intention. I've got a couple more jobs that I'm going to do, but first I'm going to stick some food in my mouth. Well folks, it is time to do something a lot more interesting than playing with diesel engines and diesel tanks and fuel lines and gear levers. It's time to put a sail on. I've been looking forward to this. This is one of the two main sails that I got with the boat, and it was the better of the two, so I pulled both out with a local sailmaker, and we decided that this was the better one of the two, and so it has been adjusted to work with my new Tides Marine sail track. So it had to have slides put on it because this mast, if you watch the earlier video, you'll know this mast was set up for a bolt rope, and bolt ropes and single-handed sailing don't work very well together. So this now runs on that low friction track. I need to find some battens for it. There's a whole bunch of battens down below, so I'm hoping some of them fit this sail. And yeah, I don't need to put the sail on right now, but for my own excitement and amusement, it's going on the boom, because then I'm one step closer to sailing. Well, it's now the end of a busy Monday, and as you can see behind me, I have some clean fenders. This boat came with an awful lot of fenders. Half of them, frankly, have gone straight in the bin because they were disgusting. The slightly less disgusting, but still pretty manky ones, I've just had a clean. They look kind of respectable. I'm not going to buy new fenders. If these work, I don't really care whether they match or not, and trust me, there isn't a single matching fender amongst them, but I'd rather spend my money on things that make the boat go faster rather than spending money on things that make it look smarter when it comes to fenders. So I have no more time today. The sun is going down, the boat is getting lifted in tomorrow morning. I have done as much as I can. I've even replaced the gas regulator and the gas hose in the gas locker at the back here, because that was looking pretty not great, and actually the date on that gas hose was 1994. This boat was built in 1995, so it was the original reg and the original gas line. So based on that, I suspect the one on the inside on the back of the cooker is equally as old. So next time my gas man is in doing a job for me on one of the boats that I look after, I'm going to get him to come in and change that and do a gas check on the whole boat so that it is absolutely fine. Last thing I want to do is have a gas leak on this boat, having done so much work to her. So tomorrow is a very exciting day. I am genuinely quite excited and slightly nervous, because obviously I've done quite a lot with the boat. I'm sure she will float. I'm pretty confident, but there's always that thing where you just don't know until you know. So tomorrow is the big day. Tuesday morning has arrived. The sun has also arrived. As you can see, it is a gorgeous day here now on the Hamble River, and Furiosa is looking lovely behind me. And today is the day she goes in the water. I'm very, very excited. I'm a little bit nervous. I have probably seen hundreds, maybe thousands of boats being launched, mostly customer boats, but often my own as well, obviously. But it doesn't make me any less nervous or less excited. I am super excited to get this boat in the water and go and have a play. Just check also that there are no leaks. So my main concern is the sail drive, which has obviously all been out and put back in again. It's the first time I've done one of those, so hopefully that will all be dry when she goes in. The teeth box are also an unusual design which isn't available anymore. You can't get spare parts for them, so I've kind of done a bit of a service on them. They've all been apart and back together again, but hopefully no leaks. There shouldn't be, but you know, time will tell. I'm fairly confident, and then once she's in the water, I can carry on with the recommissioning and get her out for a first sail. But that will probably be the subject of the next video. But wait and see. I'll do what I can to film the launch and the first impressions of her on the water, and then we'll take it from there. down here we can see this beautiful specimen floating as she should, looking amazing in the sunshine. I am so pleased to have her afloat. No leaks, not even a dribble. It is all looking pretty good. Well, the sun has come out and I am kind of squinting, but it's lovely to have this boat afloat. But there's one very, very important thing. This is very dangerous. I'm walking backwards on a pontoon. There's one very important thing that needs to happen. I'll show you what that is. That's right, folks, there has to be a cup of tea to celebrate this boat being in the water and it being a very, very successful launch. I found a very small amount of water around the sail drive diaphragm when it first went in, which worried me slightly, but I went off, had some lunch while the boat was still on the end of the lifting dock, having dried it, came back half an hour later, and it was still bone dry. So I'm very confident that that's water that had leaked leaked out of the cooling system, because I've rinsed through the cooling system on the engine, and I think I must have sprinkled a bit at the back there. Also, I tasted that water. It wasn't salty. It was fresh water. So I'm fairly confident that this boat is absolutely bone dry, having checked the seacocks. Check that. There are no other hull openings. Super simple. 3 seacocks in a whole boat. It's amazing. So what happens next? Well, we're going to bring this video to an end, but if you stay tuned, there will be, on the next episode, me finishing off the recommissioning of this boat. I've got to do a trip up the mast, I've got to do an engine service, I've got a whole bunch of other little bits and bobs to do, I've got to put a head sail on, and I've got to take it for that first sail, which I will hopefully be able to do if an autopilot turns up tomorrow, which I've ordered. So I'm going to have 2 pilots for this boat. I'm going to have the main autopilot, which I will talk about at some point soon, as that's going to be a video on its own, but I'm also going to have a backup secondary autopilot, which is just going to be a simple tiller pilot. Unfortunately, the tiller pilot that came with the boat was broken, so I have a new one turning up tomorrow, hopefully. So once that's fitted, I'll be able to sail this boat, not over the horizon maybe, but certainly around the corner to where it's going to be living for the next year or 2. Anyway, thank you again for watching. I really appreciate it. It's really gratifying to have this boat on the water and to share it with you. A massive, massive thank you to those of you that support the show using the link that is down in the description, where you can buy me a beer. If you enjoy my content, please do feel free to donate. You don't have to. It's entirely voluntary. But to those of you that do, thank you very, very much. It really does keep the lights on here at Refit and Sail. Thanks again. See you next time. I'm going to go and enjoy a cup of tea. Bye for now.